Do you think founders should only be building in spaces that they already have a network in?
I think the answer is no, but I think it's going to be really hard. Like, if you don't have a network, it's going to be really tough. But I hear about companies all the time where it's like they just research the hell out of it. Like, think about some of our companies. Like, some of them didn't have any exposure to these markets, and then they went in and did it. So I think a lot of it comes down to like the hustle of the founder and like if you can sell. And if you can sell isn't like, are you a good spokesperson for your company? It's like, do you have the grit that it takes to write 100 cold emails like a week or a day or whatever it takes to get to that number you need to make sure that you have those few customers to land your seed round, your Series A round, whatever it might be, just to keep going. Because it's all a marathon, it's not a sprint. So I think you can do it, but you have to be really freaking gritty.
All right. So this episode of the Drafting Table, a little bit different than my other episodes because I have a sidekick, a workbench sidekick.
That's me.
Our intrepid, fearless, endlessly creative, with deep, crazy hustle, the one, the only, Daniel Chesley.
Wow. Thanks so much for the introduction, Jess.
Our investor here at Workbench. I know you've only been with us for through 3 years, coming up on 3, right?
That's what I say, yeah.
But you also feel like you've been with us for 10 years.
Yeah. Time has flown by. I joined in October 2022, and it's just been like a whirlwind ever since. It's so crazy to me that it's already 2025, and before we know it, it'll be like 2030.
You joined 2022? That's crazy to think about.
Yeah, we still had some companies kicking that aren't kicking anymore.
Yeah, but we've also done some great new companies, right? And so, like, I feel like there's so much to talk about, even like what you've seen 2022 to 2025, and like the difference in companies and the market since then, right? I mean, we're definitely in the middle of like some kind of cycle. Not sure exactly what it is, but definitely some sort of an AI cycle, right? So we can talk about a lot of that. But anyways, I just want to say on the air, on the record, I'm very proud of you and everything you've done. And you have already proven out to be an incredible investor. So more to come.
Yeah. So great to hear. You know, these past 3 years, who knew how I was doing? But everyone listening, this is the words of affirmation that I needed.
I know. And your first time on a pod. So
yeah.
First time for everything. Okay. So what we thought we'd do with this episode is just share a little bit of like a sneak peek behind the scenes of just like some of the things we think about at Workbench as an enterprise software SaaS seed fund here in New York City. And we thought, you know, given that the drafting table, the whole concept is around what do we think founders should know before they start a company? And we've been getting on lots of operators and some founders on to talk about it. I think it's always interesting to talk about it, maybe even from an investor point of view, right? Like, what do we see when we are meeting such early stage early founders, pre-seed, seed, even founders who have not even started companies yet, which is a lot of time that you're spending space in. So maybe even just for like a minute, maybe do you want to talk about like the co-founders at NYC, what you started? Because I think that's like a really good context setting for like, we're really meeting founders like even before they left their companies, like before they've like truly launched, and some of the things that's like really top of mind for them.
Yeah, definitely. So Co-Founders NYC, it's a co-founder community based here in New York. It's the best place to meet your co-founder. We've been working on it since January 2025. So it's been a long time in the making, but in reality, we've hosted 3 events already. It's an online and in real life community as well. So we're working with great operators that are looking to go early and start their own companies. Usually what that means, you know, you're a technical co-founder, maybe you've never sold before, you have an idea, you want to connect with your potential sales co-founder. What we've done is created a website and in-person community to find that person and really start building. So we've had events across founder AMAs, technical founder AMAs, happy hours to get people together. And we really think that in New York City, it's one of the best places to build, and we want to be at the center of that ecosystem.
Yeah. And I think it's also, I know we named it Co-Founders at NYC, but I think it's also like have the potential to be much more than that, right? Because people have come to our events and been like, I'm definitely looking for a co-founder, but I'm also looking maybe for like our first like technical engineer, right? So I think of it really as a hub for just like meeting great, smart people who want to build in like enterprise software, SaaS, dev tools, infra. And I think you've done a phenomenal job for that. And I think a lot of that also was in direct response to people saying like, I want to meet great people here in New York. the West Coast, the Bay, obviously has a lot of these types of programs and networks already. And even in all the work that we've been doing here at Workbench the last 10 years with enterprise, SaaS operators and founders, we hadn't so explicitly said, like, come and meet perhaps your earliest founding team members, right?
Yeah. I mean, it all kind of stems from before I joined Workbench, I worked at a company called Hyperscience. I worked on our synthetic data product along with other like RevOps type workflows. Ended up thinking about companies that I wanted to start, and I had no idea how to found a co-founder. So I signed up for all the usual suspects like YC co-founder match. I was living in Chicago at the time. It was actually like really hard to navigate that and kind of cut through the noise. So what we've tried to do is just build a curated community for co-founders, founding engineers, really early salespeople that can come on board and help you build the next rocket ship.
And in just 3 months, we've already made some matches.
Yes.
So you should maybe talk about like one or even two, like whether it's a match, because again, maybe it's a match, maybe it's not a match, but just even people like kicking around ideas who have like, some good case studies already.
Yeah. So the way it works, just to give more insight, people apply. I curate it to make sure only high quality people are involved in the community at our events and then also on the webpage. So there's 2 folks in particular that come to mind. One of them was previously head of procurement at a notable growth stage startup. She's a total badass and has been working across different procurement sourcing lines for food and beverage. She ended up getting connected with another second-time founder who exited his last business. And in only
on our platform, on cofounders.nyc.
But in only 3 weeks, they've already like come together, built a product, have a few design partners, and are probably going to go out to fundraise soon. And we've just been so over the moon that they've been able to connect through co-founders and then also, excited to see the next steps there.
Yeah. And we've already actually done a ton behind the scenes on helping them in terms of getting some go-to-market stuff going, cranking. So we can talk more about that. Okay, sweet. That was our good plug for co-founders at NYC. So something we have at Workbench that we talk a lot about is Danny questions.
Oh.
So Danny, I will say at your interview, like the thing you so impressed me by is like you came with like all these really deep questions, and not questions like, oh, what hours do you guys work? You asked like really deep shit. Like, why do you think founders succeed or not?
Wow. I didn't realize that it was so in-depth, or at least that provocative, because I was pretty sure that John just liked me and was like, we'll hire him and whatever you thought, and everyone else was just to check the box. So I'm happy that you had a good experience.
This conversation doesn't even matter. But I remember you asking these questions, and since then we've joked like, as a team at Workbench, like you have all these questions and you'll ask them. We're like hanging out and you'll like lob over like some deep
I feel like it's been a while since a really deep question has been lobbed in a casual setting, but I do hear you.
So that is making this episode harder. So I tried to think through, okay, what are some Danny trademark questions? So we have some here. I think we can just like kind of pop through them. Again, what do we wish founders knew, before they start a company at their earliest of stages, even the ones we're meeting at seed, right? Like it's such an interesting like setup we're in sometimes as investors, because we get introduced to founders who are actively raising money. And so when they come to meet us, it's already in some sort of environment where like they're actively pitching us versus, hey, let's have a conversation. And I could actually perhaps give you feedback to make your pitch better, right? Or to make some part of this like packaging better. And I feel like that's like the unfortunate part of our job sometimes is, as much as I want to give that feedback, we're not always set up in a way, right? In a situation or scenario whereby I can give that very like real direct feedback. So that's what we really hope this episode is, which is like all the real shit we wish we actually could tell you that we think could make your pitch better. You still might not be a great fit for us, right? Like we might not be the best investors for you for whatever reason, but we think we can at least on the margin tweak a little bit about maybe how you think about your business, about how you're presenting it, how you're packaging it. That could set you up for better success at seed.
Totally. What's interesting is I think there's 2 different archetypes that happen when you're in the fundraising mode, which is like one, super transactional. You just got introed to a bunch of VCs. You don't really have time to make that relationship. And then the other one is what we're doing with future founders, co-founders, NYC, pre-founders, basically trying to get to know these people before they're raising. And if you can do that, you can help them really mold that pitch.
Exactly. Shape the narrative, shape how they're thinking about the business. Because again, it's not just in the pitch. Like I know we're synthesizing it, just like the pitch, But there's so much in terms of like, how do you think about the business, right? That obviously goes into pitch.
Yeah. There is something to be said though, like, this might be a point of contention between us. Like, can you teach that? And if you're teaching it, like, is that good? Because don't you want to be backing founders that are teaching you something?
This is something you asked me literally like Monday, I think, right? And we talked about that. Yeah, I mean, I think back to just, again, the most exceptional founders we've been so lucky to back at Workbench. And I would still say that most of them, needed some feedback along the way. Maybe it wasn't on their pitch. Maybe their pitch was great. But at some point along the way, they've been building, a great SaaS business in New York City and beyond, and they've needed some feedback from us. So I'm very much in the growth mindset. I'm a growth mindset person. I think everyone could use some feedback to improve, even the best. I think about it like athletes, right? Like even Roger Federer, like, has a tennis coach, right? Like, which is wild to think about. But he has someone who's like looking at his form and his racket and be like, you should kind of like swing this way, right? Even if it's 1 degree or 2 degrees difference. I actually heard a great analogy, I guess, the other week from an investor who said it's actually like Tour de France, where you're an athlete and like you're like a world-class athlete biking. But we as an investor have seen the track like 20 times.
Yeah,
so while we're not like on the actual, we're not the ones actually, on the track, but we've seen it. And so we can at least tell you, like, coming around the bend, like, this is what's coming up.
Yeah. No, it's a good analogy. I'd be curious your take from doing this for 12 years. What is something that comes around the bend that founders don't know, or something that gets you excited when you're getting to know them in a fundraising process?
Yeah. I mean, I think that can be the first one we talk about, which is 10-year vision. And Danny's like rolling his eyes. It's like the number one thing I talk about a lot. But I think it's also so much more acute now in the time that we're in with this like AI mania is most founders, when they come to pitch us, they say, we have built this product and this is what we have achieved in the last 6 months or a year, right? We have shipped this product, we have these customers, and this is what the next 2 years looks like. Which again, great, right? Like, and I think in a lot of past cycles that would have been fine. But the reality is, like, with AI, like, shit is actually changing and moving so quickly. And so maybe what used to take you 2 to 3 years to build, like, honestly, realistically, might take you only 6 months to ship now, right? And so everything is accelerated. And so therefore, if you're only looking to 2 to 3 years out, it's actually probably not far enough yet, right? So the feedback I actually give to founders is to say, could you actually start with a 10-year vision, which is say, hey, we have a vision that the world in 10 years is going to look very different. And the reason is this. And we believe that the world needs like a product or a platform like ours, right? That said, it's going to take a long time to get there because it's a huge, massive swing for the fences. And in order for us to get there, we need to start with this first wedge, which is what we've been building, again, for the last 6 to 12 months. These are all the data points of how we've done really well. And this is like the game plan and the roadmap ahead for how we're going to take on and tackle and conquer the next 10 years, right? And it's so minute. Like, it's such a minor difference in how you tell it, but starting with the end big outcome and then working backwards to say, hey, look, this is how we're breaking it up. And I know founders have struggled with that in the past because they're like, well, I don't want to like, you don't want founders who are only doing the 10-year vision and who can't execute on the day-to-day, right? So there's always that risk. But I think more than ever, you need both the 10-year vision and that 6 month those 6 months targets and goals and wedge.
Yeah. I think if I had to like think about my own investing philosophy, like 10-year vision is super important, but I'm also pretty curious about the wedge because if there's no wedge, there might not be a 10-year vision. So I think there's many ways to skin a cat, but yeah, I mean, if you think about some of the companies that we've backed in the past that are really big now, right? April Spring Health, Johnny Socure, Spencer Cockroach, like they had pretty massive visions in these massive markets, even though maybe mental health care wasn't as visible of a market as it is today with so many different like mental health care companies. Yeah. I feel like they must have had something that like really got you excited.
I mean, honestly, with April, and I've told this story before, but like I literally sat next to her at a conference and she said, I want to change how mental health care is done in this country. And even beyond.
And what year is this?
2017?
Yeah.
2018? 2018, yeah. Right. And that was very early days, right? And so the reason I think you need a massive 10-year vision now too is it's easier than ever to start a company. So you have more and more startups than ever, right? Like the field is more saturated than ever with lots of wedges. But if you end up in a wedge where there's no space for you to expand, then you're caught in a very, very small market, right? And that's, we can talk about a lot of the reasons why we've passed on companies. Like it's just not big enough of a market. So you almost need to have a big, bold, ambitious vision and big enough of a space to want to conquer. Because if you start with too small of a wedge, you might find that you are landlocked in very quickly.
Oh yeah, the world feels completely SaaSified. Yeah. Like there's a point solution SaaS for everything. So if you don't have that like market expansion or TAM expansion opportunity, you're kind of dead on arrival. At least for VC, there's probably great other businesses that you can build. So I totally hear you there. Yeah. Going back to something you mentioned earlier about the wedge itself, is there anything that gets you excited when you're hearing about the wedge? Like I know it's like a very like meta thing, the wedge, but
a Danny TM question.
Yeah. In general, like what is it that gets a VC excited if you're like a first-time founder?
Yeah, I'll go first, then you go. I think for me, it's really the rate. I mean, everyone talks about velocity kind of like ad nauseum, but I think it's like the rate. I do think it's the rate of execution. And you can see that, obviously, you can see that hopefully in like your traction, your numbers and so forth. But I actually think it's more than that. I think you can see it in the number of hypotheses you're running and the number of experiments that you've actually been able to ship and get out the door to actually test those hypotheses, right? So really great founders, when we meet with them every month, right, their rate of how many experiments they've shipped is so great, and it allows them to learn really fast, right? I remember someone told me, back in the day, like it's not that these founders are like smarter. They just take more shots on goal so that when they're wrong, they can course correct quickly, right? Versus like if you're only taking one shot on goal, like if it's not right, if it could be right, but like you're only doing one versus someone who's doing 100, right? Like your percentage is there and your rate of learning is just so much faster and you can just adapt so much quickly. So to me, that speed of execution really matters. I almost... for me, you have to find the right balance of quality, right? Because you can't just be like, shipping stuff and like have it not be that high of quality. But in general, I would err towards speed over having it be obviously. And
when you say shipping, you're not just talking like
I don't mean product.
I
don't mean product. I mean like experiments around go to market, who you're selling to. Yeah, product is part of that too. Marketing, the whole shebang. Yeah. What would you say?
I think whenever I get excited about a company, it's usually because they're operating in like a very particular niche, and that niche can expand to be this like micro monopoly. Yeah. So that's like step one. Step two involves like who this person is, and like if they're completely like paranoid that someone is going to take this market before they get there, that is really interesting because I don't think it's a normal person thing to do to go try to build a company that'll be worth $1, $2, $3, $4 billion. So that's what we're looking for. So if you can find someone who's attacking a really unique wedge and then from there has a plan on how they're going to expand, very structured go-to-market ideas that they're going to experiment with, to your point, and they can do all of this under the self-pressure that they put themselves under, they're probably in a pretty good position to at least raise around and go from there.
Yeah. I mean, your point here, though, especially is really spot on, which is what is a unique wedge. And the reality, and we're filming this is April 2nd, 2025, right? We have seen how many legal AI companies, how many sales AI companies. And again, I don't want this to be on the podcast and be like, well, Jess and Danny don't like AI, sales AI or legal AI. We're actually not saying that, but we are saying if you're going to be in a really crowded, saturated space, you sure as hell better have a very creative, different way of attacking the space than everyone else, right? Like I always say, it's like if you're playing the same game as everyone, you can't expect a different outcome. If everyone is playing the same game and you're building a similar product and you're going after similar customers, right? You either need to build an airplane to go over people, you need to get a shovel to either build under people, or you need a jet ski to go around them. That one makes no sense. I definitely just made that one up. But and a few ways you could do this, right? Like we actually heard a really great example today of a very, very late stage company. It's actually in a hardware safety space that, realized that their customers couldn't actually, buy them within a budget cycle because of a long enterprise sales process. So they said, okay, well, why don't we just start with a credit card swipe and let let everyone just buy 5 of these devices to start. And that way, you don't need to be part of the budget cycle, but we can get people using the product. And that's what they did. They got people using the product, loving it. And so then a year later, when the budget cycle actually did come up, then they were able to lock them in. So that, to me, I'm like, that is actually so creative. There's other examples where people have given away the product for free entirely, right? And said, look, I know we can't be part of your budget cycle today, but we are so confident that our product is going to be good enough that in a year, when you actually have time to make budget, you're locked in, you're using us, you cannot rip us out, right? So I think those are like really creative examples. It usually, I think, does come down to something fundamentally different about your product, something fundamentally different about a customer segment you're targeting. So if people are going large enterprise or going SMB, et cetera, it could be your, I guess, like product implementation, right? Whether or not you need to be implemented, maybe you don't need a heavy duty implementation. I think the pricing and packaging is a big one. So open source or not, right? Like those are just some examples of different airplanes and jet skis, but it's really hard otherwise, right? To play the same exact hand-to-hand combat. So hard.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I feel like that's one of the reasons we pass most is just like it's completely similar to an existing incumbent. And like to me, if you're going in the same market, attacking an incumbent that might have some cash that's still nimble, still growing, like that's really hard. Yeah. I think like some of the companies on the application side that we've done recently that we've gotten excited about have been these like kind of like really sleepy markets that maybe they were PE backed. They had, they'd been founded like 50 years ago and they've just been bolting on more and more software and it's like poorly integrated. It might be on-prem. The move to the cloud still isn't there. And finding these founders that have like that really specific view on like what's differentiated about what they're going to build versus the incumbent, that like gets us excited.
I know. So when people have been like, what are you into? Like, I mean, recently, right? I'm like, I want to be in spaces I know nothing about, like so niche in some ways. And then you need a founder who knows the hell out of it, right? And ideally, again, a space where there's not as so many competitors. You want some competitors, obviously, but it's way better to be in space with only 3 competitors versus 30, right?
Yeah. It's funny because I saw a tweet recently that was like, oh, Stripe, OpenAI, SpaceX, like all these companies, like they're obviously the biggest ones, Wiz, because they have like the biggest market. But it's like, yeah, these have like huge markets. But at the same time, like
I think they said they had the best product, right?
I don't know.
Did they say that? I thought the tweet was like they had the best product and therefore they won. And then the follow-up was like, it's not that they won. It's just because they were in a really big market. And there's actually many players.
Yeah. But like, even if there are many players, like we've been investors in companies that have won those markets and lost, and it's tough.
Yeah.
So
it really is. Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's our take on super competitive spaces. I mean, TAM is hard, right? And it's like, it's such an eye roll of a thing. It's like, of course, VCs.
How long do you spend on the TAM slide in someone's deck?
Never. I'll speak for myself, right? A TAM deck that says the total market is $5 billion. I'm just like 55, whatever. Like those numbers to me are all effectively made up. I mean, what do you think?
I spend equally little time on them. But for example, I met a company that was building in like the immigration law space. And I thought it was actually really interesting. And what they wanted to do was just bolt on additional like legal use cases. So if you start with personal injury or immigration, you can add real estate, personal injury, other ones as well. And like it can add up over time to be something. And especially right now in AI, it kind of feels like everyone's trying to take these services companies and, put AI in them and then become a company themselves. So I actually thought that was really interesting. But then we see things like customer success and like, software very nebulous. Like it's kind of harder to pin down.
Yeah.
So like if I know how many lawyers there are in the world, like it's possible to like wrap your head around.
Totally. Well, I think it goes back to what we talked about first, which is a 10-year vision. Our founder was able to articulate, we're starting in immigration, but then we can go into personal injury. We can go into yada, yada. Like that is the 10-year vision, right? Whereas if you're just telling us we're only doing immigration law, it is effectively like,
yeah, that's not as exciting.
That is like the reason why you hear us talking about TAM, right? So whether we call it TAM or 10-year vision, right? Like it's effectively the same thing, right? You need to be able to paint to us a 10-year vision, and that part of that, the TAM is really big. That you have enough to do in 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Some markets, there's just too many people and it's not big enough for 2 of us. So
totally.
You got to win it.
What else is a hot take from this week?
As a VC, like disqualifying is probably like your best skill.
Yeah.
Because then you can go deep in a category, recognize if it's for you or if it's not for you. Yeah. Maybe you really like the space, but the founder is not great. Or maybe the, solution to how they want to go about the problem isn't right for you. But I do think that you have a key phrase there, which is like disqualifying is important.
Yeah. The hard thing is, because we're in the middle of this right now, is like the founder's in the middle. So the ones that are very obvious for all the reasons, like all the kind of checkbox that you and I have, super easy. Then there are ones where we're like, okay, this is just not going to be fit for us for whatever reason. It's the ones in the middle, the messy middle, where there's some really good stuff, and that's a part that's very fun about being a seed investor, but it's also like quite hard, right? Because it's not always easy. It's almost never easy at seed to be like, this founder is going to be great. This founder is going to be exceptional. Anyone who says that obviously is like looking at things like with like the lens of 2020 hindsight.
Yeah. And it's funny because I hear you guys tell stories about companies that we either missed, passed on, invested in from the early days, and like it wasn't clear. It's never obvious. I think sometimes there's characteristics that make it attractive, but the messy middle is where VCs get fucked.
It's also where you and I spend the most time.
Yeah.
Right? Like think about the stuff that you and I are actively working on just this week. Like it's hard.
Yeah, totally. I talk to my Series A friends and I'm like, your job is so easy. And everyone probably says the same thing because they're like, you're a seed investor. You're just like wheeling and dealing, throwing deals around. But I think like when you have a finite amount of companies in the universe, like that makes it easier for them.
Totally. Yeah. A seed is, it's such different ball games. Every round is so different. So that part is fun, but I think that's a really hard part. And I know when founders talk to us, they're like, it's so frustrating. Like, why did you pass on me, right? Like, don't I check off like all the stuff on every box? And sometimes they do, right? But there usually is one or two things that,
Yeah, I feel like you're such a gracious like passer. And like passing is obviously never fun, but you have to do it in a way that like isn't hurting the person's feelings because you're not trying to do that. You want to give like some feedback, but also make sure that like you can maintain a relationship in the future in case maybe they come back to market, they have a friend, or maybe like we have an ask for you one day. It's very possible, but I feel like you're good at passing. Is there anything you want to say there?
I mean, you've heard this because obviously we've like worked on this extensively at work. Like we've literally done internal meetings and workshops on like how to write really good pass emails because they're important because again, this is such a long game. And the number of times, we did a deal where it was sent to us by a founder we ended up not going with, right? Like, and the number of times we have met founders who come back again and start a second company and they think of us because they had a great experience with us. Like this truly is such a relationships business. So you just generally have to do right by them. But you've heard the story. The reason I think so much about past emails is because John and I obviously started Workbench 12 years ago. We had to raise every fund from the ground up. The reason I say that is because we have been passed on many, many times by LPs on whether or not they want to invest in us as a fund, right? And I remember every one of those emails and, I know how it feels. Like it doesn't feel good. You're not super thrilled getting it. And so even the little amount of care that an investor puts in, I think goes a long way. It doesn't change the outcome. Like we still probably, we're not going to end up investing. We're not going to be the right partner for you at this time, but maybe at some point in the future, right? And so.
And how often does that happen? Are there examples where someone's passed on us fund one, or they said they want to watch us grow, and now?
100%. Oh my gosh! Like it happens. It happens all the time as from LPs to funds because you can track funds over. In our case, like a decade. Like some people have been, following our work for 10 years. It's a little harder for us at seed because you get one shot at seed generally, right? Unless a founder starts a company again. So like the past period is like much more finite, I guess, for us.
Yeah.
So
totally.
All right, sweet. What else? Okay, here's one that I'm like, I feel like we got to shout from the ceilings. Because it goes back to the packaging thing, right? And where I think these are like the things that I think are like very doable things for founders to do that are that can help them, right? There's just some things that are like fundamentally like a founder cannot change about their business or whatever, right? But then there are things that they like is very like very possible for them to like control. And we talk a lot about data rooms. Yeah. Do you want to talk about like the customer feedback part?
Yeah, definitely. But just to add to your point, like you started this conversation talking about like what you want to impart on founders when they go out to raise. And I think like you just had a really good point, which is that you can't change aspects of the business, but you can change how you package it. And I think the packaging goes a really long way with investors. At least for us, it does. So we obviously get really excited about someone during the initial conversations. We'll do some homework on our end, but then we'll ask for some data. And at Seed, there's not much data, but the data that you do provide can be really helpful to getting across the finish line and also just making the fundraise process go faster. Because if you're a founder, you want to stop fundraising, stop talking to all these VCs who don't know anything about your business, and just go faster, go back to building. So we have a pretty structured like data room request. There's about like 6 or 7 things I think that go into it. So if you have a memo, that's great. Deck, customer call notes, product deck that goes deeper into, what is it that your product's going to look like, integrations that you might have, what's the implementation like, competitive landscape, sales pipeline, customer list, all of that stuff super helpful. But one thing that we always talk most about is these customer call notes and gong recordings. That might seem kind of strange because maybe you're listening and you're thinking, oh, I don't want to share like my coveted customer call notes. But in reality, like that is the thing that gets us over the line. We want to hear customer validation. Even if it's a transcript that you have with AI, it makes it so easy to go through it, ask questions to it directly. I'm going to plug in Granola here because it's like my favorite note-taking app ever. But in general, like that's the thing that helps us see how much customers really need this. And if it's a big pain and there's a lot of vocal customers out there, we love it.
Yeah, Granola needs to sponsor this podcast. But I mean, it's so true because, again, I think founders keep it very guarded. They're like, this is like my precious, like notes. But there's many ways. Again, we don't need to see the name.
Also redacted.
You should redact it. You should anonymize it. But again, at Seed, there's not that much to go off of. So your value, your gold is customers who love you, right? Or even prospects. I don't think they all have to be customers, but prospects who say, hey, like this is a huge pain point. Like we might not be able to get there this quarter to buy you, but like we'd love to stay in touch, right?
Sometimes I think there's more value in hearing why you disqualified a deal than there could be with like why this customer is still kicking with you.
Totally, right? And so there's so much richness there. And you can hope that an investor will go and do this homework themselves. But the reality is, like, one, it's going to be very hard for them to get to all these types of users and personas on their own, for them to do it fast enough in time, and for them to really be able to pick out, like, the personas that are the best ones or, like, are yours, right? So a good example is you might be selling to developers. But there's so many types of developers, right? Are you selling to security developers, infra developers, application developers? And if you leave it up to chance for a VC to go talk and call up their 5 like best developer friends, like you're leaving a lot up to chance, right? Because those are likely not engineers or software engineers like in your ICP. And so I think reduce the risk of them having to like they will of course have to still do their own homework, but like the more you can do it for them and lay the groundwork and set yourself up for just success, like you should do it.
Yeah, I think the data room is like a super important part of the story that you're telling. And the more you can have a structured story and not have the VCs deviate from that line, the better. And that's where like the customer call notes come in.
I also think the memo is so huge, right? So obviously everyone knows the art of a deck. Everyone's like put together.
Decks are overrated.
Yeah, I mean, a good design definitely goes a long way, but the deck doesn't really go into all the details that we see in a memo. So we saw this. The first really good memo we saw was probably like 3 years ago, right? That memo was like, I was like, this is very good. Yeah. And since then we've seen a few. I would say it's still not common to get great memos, right? Like it's really not, right? So the ones we do see though, like cover everything. They cover the market, they cover the landscape, competitive landscape, they cover why this is needed, they cover their customer list, they cover all the things they've learned on go-to-market, pricing, risks. Like they're effectively
writing the memo for you.
Writing our memo for us, exactly, right? And so, like again, you can hope that a VC will write a good memo on your behalf, but like if you can tee up the work for them, Like, we love it. You love it. I love it. Right. And it really shows, I think, like just like a level of thoughtfulness. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. You're just helping them get over the finish line quicker. And I don't think you're going to find conviction in the data room, but it definitely helps you get the team on board.
Totally. I think the only other thing, maybe last few things is, we planned a really big New York City pre-seed go-to-market summit a few weeks ago, which was really fun. We had about 100 pre-seed founders from New York City join us for truly like a boot camp masterclass. It was like 4 hours long, just like deep sales, like mastery basically, right? Like a sales 101 on like everything you need to know. And the reality, people often ask, I think even us, like, did you come from this world? And I was like, everything I learned on the job here. And I learned alongside our founders, right? And we're very lucky that we have an amazing sales advisor, Kieran Narsu, shout out, who's been great. He's taught me so much, but like I continue to learn, right? So we put together this event. I mean, there's a ton in it. We put together like a 40-page like workbook, right? I learned a ton even in putting that together. But it still continues. I guess it surprises me, doesn't surprise me, but the reality is like even in the 12 years we've been doing this, like there's not a sales SaaS school that like founders can go to, right? And no universities, as far as I know, like they're really teaching formally like enterprise sales like as part of their curriculum. So like anyone who's really in a sales role, like for the most part, has had to like learn it on the job, right? And this is especially acute for founders who for the most part are technical, who are building great products, but who never sold a 6 to 7 figure deal. So we always say like, our big thing is one, enterprise sales can feel hard as fuck, but it is very learnable, right? And there are frameworks and methodologies that you can learn, which is great. And ideally, you can learn it, again, within a community with peers who have done it so that you're not just like trying to figure it out on your own, right? Because you definitely don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like that was a huge takeaway. But it definitely, I guess in some ways, still not surprised, but like the number of founders who just like don't know a lot of this stuff, right? It's still, every year we meet founders who don't know how to do a great demo call, how to set up a great, like what to prepare, what to research for your first call with a prospect, right? How to think about pilots, right? And it's like, it's still, I guess the word is this still surprises me.
Yeah. If you've never sold software before or even bought software, it's going to be really hard to sell, especially when you're a small seed stage company that has no brand behind you. So I think the pre-seed summit was super helpful. What was really interesting was hearing from, we had the Series C, hypey, great company. Founder. We had this awesome founder in the security space come by, and all of his tips and tricks were really interesting because you would think like someone who's skyrocketed as much as they did, they would have some secret sauce, and he was just like, hey, the secret sauce is like stick to the playbook and don't reinvent it. So that was really interesting. Yeah.
And he learned it on the job too. He also did not have formal enterprise sales training. He was a software engineer before.
Yeah. And I think, a shameless plug for us, like really if you're a technical founder and you've never sold software before, I feel like there's really nowhere better to go than Workbench, where you can get access to all of our sales advisors, intros to customers, everything that you might need to get
your playbooks.
To get your feet under the way.
Yeah, I know. That is, I mean, in that way, like I selfishly am glad that people still have a lot to learn.
We also have to beef it up and make it more noticeable and recognizable for folks to find.
Totally, yeah, and that's a lot of what we're going to be doing, especially with this pod, but also beyond. I mean, I think the number one reminder for me, you had listed here like pipeline generation for startups, right? And the reality is like pre-seed, you're so early. Like you're really trying to close your like first 5 customers, right? Like just like put it in reality. And so a lot of what I hear founders doing is they're like, I've reached out cold to like all these prospects and like I'm not really getting any bites. And I'm like, okay, but that's because you have barely your product and you're still super early, right? Like how has what does warm outreach look like? Like, have you hit up literally everyone, like in your immediate network, your second degree network, and so forth, ex-colleagues of yours, and they'll be like, oh, I don't have that warm of a network. I don't know that many people in this space. Then I really would say, like, you should probably really think about, like, what you're building in, right? Of course, you could pick a space that's totally new to you and try to break in. But if you have no network there, I think it's really hard. I mean, I'm curious your take. Do you think founders should only be building in spaces that they already have a network in?
It's a good question. I think the answer is no, but I think it's going to be really hard. Like if you don't have a network, it's going to be really tough. But I hear about companies all the time where it's like they just research the hell out of it. Like think about some of our companies, like some of them didn't have any exposure to these markets and then they went in and did it. So I think a lot of it comes down to like the hustle of the founder and like if you can sell. And if you can sell isn't like, are you a good spokesperson for your company? It's like, do you have the grit that it takes to write 100 cold emails like a week or a day or whatever it takes to get to that number you need to make sure that you have those few customers to land your seed round, your Series A round, whatever it might be, just to keep going because it's all a marathon. It's not a sprint. So I think you can do it, but you have to be really freaking gritty.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it is possible. I just think if you could start in a space where you might already have some, even a few kind of warm connects to even get you. Maybe the warm connects are not even the customers maybe it's like your uncle's best friend. I don't know. Right? But like works in construction, therefore has a construction company, therefore can like maybe introduce you to someone else, right? Like I think and that's why obviously founders who have like a lot of domain expertise in some ways I think do have a little bit of a leg up because they at least have like a starting point by which to not even just close customers, but like how do you get feedback from prospects, right? On what to even build.
Yeah. Yeah, I would wonder if you are having trouble finding a potential prospect or customer, maybe this isn't right for you. And like maybe you're not the sales guy and maybe you're a great product person and you should maybe think about slotting out of the sales role into the engineering or product or whatever it might be. Because at the end of the day in an early stage company, you can either build the product or sell the product. And if you can't do one of those, like you have to find someone who can.
Yeah. I mean, I would actually go so far to say if you're a pre-seed founder, you need to actually be able to do the sales. You might be able to have a co-founder who does sales. But the reality is like it's too small, right? When you're only two people, both of you like probably need to be building the product a little bit and both probably have to be like on customer calls. Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
I know
like
so many founders.
AE solutions engineer kind of setup, but I do think you're right.
I think a lot of founders, again, you and I talk about this a lot, but they like start and they will have maybe they'll close a few customers, but then as soon as they can, they'll hire someone to do it for them. And I actually just think that's totally wrong way to think about it. And that if you're a founder, you got to sign up to be selling like for the rest of your life, right? You're selling the product. At some point, of course, you can hand it off head of sales, but you're selling the product for a while. You are selling the vision for the company, so you're fundraising, right? Like, obviously. You are selling the opportunity to work with your company, so recruiting. Like, you're constantly selling. So I actually would be if I think a founder told me, like, I don't like selling, I would really, really kind of really push them on that.
Yeah. I mean, when we meet founders where it's clear that they can't tell a story and they can't sell, that's like almost an automatic DQ. And like maybe that's on us because they learn to become great sellers, but it becomes really hard.
Yeah, and I think the whole point of this podcast, series really is like there's no way you're going to learn everything before you start becoming a founder. Like so much of it is like you got to learn on the job and you're going to make mistakes and that's totally part of the journey and that's what's really fun. But if you can just get little legs up and like in many different parts of the business, just even a little bit, right? And we talk about this a lot at Workbench too, is like as a seed fund, like if we can help you get to an answer quickly instead of you looking for 4 months, right? Searching for, I don't know, an intro to some customer or figuring out how much to pay your first AE. If instead of 4 months, you can do that in 2, then like we have helped accelerate, your seed journey by like, what is it? Like 20% already, right? Or 10%, which is a lot, right? Because your seed journey is like not that long. So I just think you want to give yourself every little bit of an advantage, no matter where it is. Like, and all of it compounds over time.
Yeah. One thing we talk about a lot is AI, obviously, and how it's impacting companies. Like, what are you seeing in this world right now? Not on a product side, but like, what does AI mean for venture, for seed, for companies? Sorry.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I don't know if I want to talk about this.
Okay.
Only because I'm like it's not that tactical.
Yeah.
Unless you want to spend something very tactical about
I was thinking about like the velocity stuff, just like you have to have an answer because everyone's looking for AI in the sense of like you need to grow faster, you need velocity of logos, you need to be in some type of like market that's like less competitive. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I'm just like, what's like the tactical thing that they like a founder would take away?
Yeah. Grow faster. Be in a better market.
I know, but then you sound so investor-y. You sound so investor-y. It's like, I think the question is like, okay, grow faster. How do you grow faster?
Yeah.
Right. And from what I've talked about with so many other investors is, at least with like VC, at least with like the really, really exceptional companies. One of them is I actually think like superior products are very obvious now. And so I can think of a few, obviously, in obviously like co-development world, like et cetera, like where the product actually is just like very, very good, right? That's one part of it. But I think, and so yeah, in those companies, they've been able to, the product is so good, they've been able to unlock sales because they've done it PLG style, et cetera, et cetera. But there are companies growing really fast using just like legit enterprise sales too, right? And so I think some of them have been able to do that, not because they have some like fancy AI trick up their sleeve, but I do think it's like they do have a lot of like the fundamentals down of like knowing who your ICP is, knowing your value prop, right? Stuff that like, again, sounds really boring, but like is really still very fundamental. So I think they've been able to, some of them have been able to ride the wave of like, you cannot miss out on AI. We are your AI solution for legal, for accounting, and so forth.
Do you think customers care about AI?
I think some customers do care about AI. And you and I have talked about this a lot. I think in the past people are like, eye roll AI fatigue. But it's become, I think there has become a tipping point in the last quarter where like it's beyond just like the strategy deck and it's like come into actual, because people are seeing like there are actual products out there that help you save like truly hours and hours and hours and hours of work, right? And I think it goes back to like the product is actually very, very good. It's interesting here. So you had written down VC fundraising tips, intros, keep them short and clean. What did you mean by that?
You know what I mean.
Which
sometimes
intros? You mean when they're starting? Oh, your actual introduction. Oh,
so
I didn't realize that.
Maybe if we paint a picture for like how fundraising goes down, if you're not located in the same city, you'll have a 30-minute Zoom call probably. Yes. And those 30 minutes are pretty precious where you want to spend some time on an intro. And if you're the founder.
On yourself.
I'll kick off the call. I'll say, I'm Danny. I work at Workbench. We're investing out of our new fund. We invest across all things enterprise, but then kick it over to the founder. And sometimes the founder, they take like 15 minutes on their intro, leaving 15 minutes for the rest of the call. And
an intro being, just to be very clear, like their personal life story.
Yeah, life story, their background, how they decided to found the company, what they've been kind of like working on beforehand. And we want that to be like 2 minutes. Short and punchy, make sure that you hit all the important stuff, but do not go into every detail about every project you've ever worked on, because that just makes investors less and less interested, I think.
Well, I think it just like, again, it doesn't let us get into the actual meat of what we want to talk about, which is the company today and what you've done to date and what your 10-year vision is, right?
Yeah, but I think if you think about like an excitement meter, like it starts really high, and then the more, if you talk about something not as interesting, like the excitement meter goes down. So you got to get to the meat and potatoes.
Well, I think it also goes back to storytelling, right? And it's like how you tell that first 3-minute story is like a huge indicator, right? And so like within 3 minutes, you're like, oh, this is
and like if they can't tell that good story to me, a VC, like how are they going to do it to customers, to potential hires, et cetera?
Yeah. Interesting. I haven't talked about that with you in a while. So I guess I've been thinking about this, and I don't think we've even talked about it yet, is, you know, even as seed investors, we get sent from another investor, like let's say pre-seed investor. They'll send us an email and say, hey, we would love to introduce you to a company. This is their blurb. I have always had like a very specific formula, if you will, of like how I think companies should write their blurbs. And I think I'm changing my view on it, right? Because a lot of time, the best blurbs I think can use a lot of numbers. That's not always possible at seed, but like as our companies are raising Series A's, they usually have some really nice numbers in there, which is like how much they've grown, how many customers they have, and maybe select logos. Like very factual things, right? Which is like, these are factual things that we have accomplished in our last, in the seed round, and therefore you should be excited about at Series A. Obviously, if you're coming from pre-seed to seed, it's a little bit harder, less data points, etc. My take is we've seen a lot of these blurbs, and we take a lot of them, to be fair. But there are some that we pass on because we're just like, I can't tell by the blurb if this is like interesting or not, right? And so a lot of the pre-seed blurbs obviously have like an overview of the company, like what they're doing, the founder's background. But I almost feel like what needs to be added in there needs to be like a why now, or like why this is important or different, right? Like, again, going back to like the legal AI example, it almost needs to be aligned. Like, I know you've seen a lot of legal AI companies, but the reason we're different is because fundamental like secret sauce point of view on the world, right? And I almost think like that needs to be in that like intro like blurb, because otherwise I read it, I'm just like, what is different about this company versus like the 20 other ones we've met?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to glean from a blurb, from a deck, from anything. You have to talk. And if you don't have that like in-person experience, like it's very easy to pass over. Yeah. So I totally hear you there. I
think a better blurb would probably get more people excited to even want to take that intro call with you and have a very short 3-minute intro. Yeah. And then talk about the 10-year vision.
Are you ever responding to cold inbound?
Yeah, we have, right? And I think it does go back to, again, their inbound email and overview on who they are and why they're different or better than the solution on the market is really, really punchy. And unfortunately, I don't think enough people do that. They tend to be like, we've closed this many customers, we've done this, but it doesn't really tell me like, why is your AI sourcing solution better than what's already out there, right? I think that's the difference in B2B. It's like you're almost always displacing something, almost, right?
Yeah. I think I'm yet to see something where there's true greenfield opportunity. And if there is, maybe it's a bad adopter of software and people have tried in the past.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something that's been like really greenfield.
Like I think Service Titan was probably really interesting back in the day. And now there's like 50 Service Titans that are all seed. Similar to the Spring Health example where now there's a lot of mental health care. But at the time, there probably were only a few. And Spring was one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think you and I have talked about this, but I still think, and look, I could be wrong. AI is changing a lot. So, you know, tech really is fundamentally different than it was before. So I will give it that. But as we go back to the example from before, which is like how you price and package, like how your distribution model, like that also makes a huge difference, right? Because again, it's easier for everyone now to build tech, right? Like in that way, AI has leveled the playing field in really cool ways. So everyone can spin up a company now. So then you, on the tech side, so you have to be really, really creative on the distribution so that you can beat out the 20 other lookalikes.
Yeah. What is like differentiation in distribution even look like? I'm trying to think myself.
Well, it's one company I talked about earlier where they did like the credit card swipe.
Yeah. I mean, like, call me jaded, but like I actually just don't think that there's any true white space left in the world because everyone is so focused on building companies. So you have to be differentiated in some way. So
there is still white space.
Name an area that doesn't have software that you think can actually be a venture scale market.
Oh, well, that's different. Those are two different things.
I think it's the same thing.
No, I think there's a lot of like companies that can be built. They just are not venture scale.
Sure.
Yeah. So those are two separate things.
But that's outside of our universe, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But if you're really just like dreaming, yeah, there's like there must be white space stuff. They're just not in B2B, I would say, maybe. Sure. There's like some really cool consumer stuff, I think, that's out there.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be creative there. Yeah. Otherwise, you can't just build Instagram with a prettier UI.
Yeah. Yeah. What advice have you found yourself giving a lot lately?
So I meet a lot of people that are really early. Like they're still at their jobs, but have an idea and they don't exactly know how to go about like figuring out what to build. So maybe they have an idea. Maybe they're in between a few, and they're just exploring. So something that you told me that I thought was really smart, I told this back to you and you don't remember it, but you once mentioned to me that, go dig around in some of these like either PE-backed companies that were acquired 20 or 30 years ago, companies that IPO'd. Those are probably companies that are ripe to like be reinvented. Today, you think about that in like SAP Concur. There's so many companies that are going after that space. People have done that playbook a lot, but for really early stage founders, like identifying like what are tools or processes that you're doing internally today, what are the internal teams at your company doing to sell to your existing company and coworkers. For example, at Hyperscience, we built synthetic data to power a lot of our models. So we were doing data extraction of documents. We built synthetic data to build fake data, replace it with fake PII, and then train our models with that. We were doing that for internal models and not necessarily for customer-facing ones, but we did that and learned that, hey, maybe synthetic data is a really big opportunity. Afterwards, we looked around, saw if there was an opportunity in the market. Unfortunately, didn't see it. But, a few years later, Gretel gets acquired by NVIDIA for like $300 million. So maybe that could have been us. Who knows? Yeah. But I think it was still a good exercise about like, what are we selling internally to ourselves? And could that be a developer product, an internal dashboard that has like some system of action associated with it? So I think like it oftentimes comes back to like early stage founders like figuring out what they want to build.
Yeah. The counterpoint I'll say to that is like we meet a lot of founders who have only ever worked at like the best companies, right? And so then they'll like come to us and be like, well, this was a huge problem at our company. And I have to tell them that is not a big problem for most companies, right? Because you've only ever worked at the Google of the world, right? So I think that's like the trap most early stage founders fall into is they're looking for a problem. They only have a certain set of lived experiences. And if your lived experiences are limited, then or you've only seen one part of the world, then you'll only really ever know to build. And those, I would say,
so you got to go talk to customers.
Yeah. You got to go talk to customers. But again, if your customers are all people who just look like you, right? So again, it goes back to like size of the market, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but we've met folks who've even taken jobs at other companies that are less sexy than working at Meta to go learn more about it.
Totally.
So like I think it's like if you're looking for your startup idea to form in like 1 week, it's probably not going to happen that way. Like this is either like a multi-month to year journey.
Oh, I mean, I think it could be years. I mean, I think what you're talking about is we've met founders who are like, I am so interested about insurance. I'm going to go find a job and work at an insurance company just so that I can like build an insurance. Like that is like a multi-year process, right? I just think like for a lot of founders, they look at their own immediate lived experiences. And, you and I know like that's not always like a big enough market.
Yeah, we call those the champagne problems.
Yeah, the champagne problem. So, and today, you need more than champagne, right?
Yeah.
Back to the painkiller days.
I think another one is just like about customer validation and how if you're thinking about raising a seed round, like that's at least what like we're looking most for is like what is the real big pain that you guys are solving and how can we validate that by speaking with either people in our network, you giving us these customer call notes, anything that gets us over the finish line quicker is what we want.
Yeah. I mean, I think the advice I give to people is like, you need to talk to like 100 people.
Oh,
and like very literally, right? And like the best founders we see like truly have a Notion doc of like 100 calls they have done. The thing I will also push back though is like it's also in how you do those customer calls, right? So I feel we could do a whole, another episode on like the mom test, right? But like what you're asking in those customer calls at the earliest stages actually makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks for being on the drafting table with me. Thanks for sidekicking this.
Yeah.
All right,
we took our one-on-one here.
Yeah, I know. We'll just do that here. We will add to this list more Danny TM questions.
Yeah. Sounds good.